7 odd things you do without noticing as you age. Aging is a natural part of life. But let's face it, there are some things that happen as we age that we don't always notice until they've become pretty obvious to others. You know the type of things that everyone sees, but no one talks about? The awkward little habits or changes in behavior that sneak up on us as we get older. Trust me, there's nothing glamorous about it, and yet, it happens to all of us. It's one of those things that makes you wonder, wait, when did this happen? But, spoiler alert, it's not just you. Everyone goes through it. So, let's talk about some of the odd things you do without noticing as you age. These are the ugly things that creep up, and we all have to deal with them, whether we like it or not. Let's talk about something that may seem harmless at first, but can slowly become a little annoying to others, those pesky filler words. You know what I'm talking about. The like, you know, and even that sneak into almost every sentence. It's like they invade your speech without you even noticing. You're chatting away with your friends or family, and suddenly you catch yourself saying 5 times in a row, and then you wonder, wait, when did I become that person? We've all been there. At first, it's just a little slip-up. But over time, it becomes a habit that's harder to shake. I mean, 1 or 2 filler words are no big deal, right? But when it starts happening every few words, it gets a little awkward. I remember this one time I was talking to my aunt at a family dinner. She's one of those people who never has a shortage of things to say. But that night, I noticed something. She kept saying "you know" after almost every sentence. It was like she had a secret pact with herself to make sure "you know" appeared at least 5 times in every story. I didn't want to be rude and point it out, but you could see it in her eyes every time she said it, waiting for us to confirm we knew what she was talking about. It was endearing, though. You could tell she didn't realize she was doing it. In fact, it wasn't until much later that I realized that I was doing it, too. As we age, our brains slow down a bit. Cognitive processing isn't as quick as it used to be, and that's where the filler words start sneaking in. You're trying to find the right word, but it's taking a little longer than usual. So, your brain fills in the blanks with a like or to give you a few extra seconds to catch up. According to some studies, older adults use more filler words as a result of this slowdown. And let's be honest, nobody likes being the person in a conversation, but it's a tough habit to break. Before you know it, you've become that person, and suddenly, you're noticing everyone else's side glances. They don't mean to be rude, but we all know what those looks mean. It's like they're politely waiting for you to finish your thought, without the interruptions. Now, let's talk about something that can be a little cringeworthy but happens to the best of us, getting way too comfortable with the volume of our voice. You know the moment. You're in a conversation, and all of a sudden, it feels like you're shouting, even though you're not angry or upset. You're just talking. And then you realize that people around you are kind of inching away, giving you that uncomfortable look like, do I need to hear all of this at this decibel level? What's going on here? Well, here's the thing. As we get older, our hearing doesn't stay as sharp as it once was. It's a gradual thing, sneaks up on you slowly. And, without even realizing it, your brain tells your mouth, hey, speak up a little, I can't hear myself as well. So, you do. And it works. Sort of. But meanwhile, everyone around you is awkwardly trying to make eye contact with you while subtly pulling away, hoping you'll dial it back a bit. The truth is, this type of hearing loss doesn't happen overnight. It's not like one morning you wake up and boom, you can't hear anything. It's a slow process, and most of the time, people don't even realize it's happening. But here's where things get tricky. According to the National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, about 1 in 3 people between the ages of 65 and 74 experience some level of hearing loss. And the thing is, most people don't want to admit it. They don't want to face the reality that maybe their hearing isn't what it used to be. So, instead of getting a hearing test or talking about it, they just turn the volume up on their conversations. Before you know it, they're that person shouting at dinner, and everyone's just waiting for a chance to say, could you please tone it down a little? It's a hard habit to break, especially when you don't even realize you're doing it. Another strange thing that starts to happen as we get older is the occasional experience of awkwardly long pauses during conversations. And I'm not talking about those natural little pauses where you just take a second to think about what to say next. No, I'm talking about those uncomfortable silences that seem to stretch on forever, where everyone around you is just waiting for you to say something. It's that moment when you're in the middle of a conversation and suddenly your brain just hits a wall. You know exactly what you want to say, but for the life of you, you just can't remember how to say it. It's kind of like trying to remember the name of a movie you watched last week. You know it was amazing, you know you loved it, but for some reason, your brain decides that this is the one piece of information it's just going to refuse to give up. So, there you are, staring at the person you're talking to, and you can see that their patience is wearing thin. You try to smile and maybe laugh it off, hoping they don't notice how long you've been stuck in silence. But they definitely notice. Now, let me tell you about this one time I was chatting with a friend over lunch. We were laughing about something silly, and I was just about to tell a funny story when it happened. I opened my mouth, ready to spill the punchline, but instead, nothing came out. I stared at my friend, and she stared back at me. We both just waited, and after what felt like an eternity, I finally said, I totally forgot the punchline. She burst out laughing, but I could feel my cheeks turning red. It was like my brain had simply decided to take a nap right in the middle of the conversation. I couldn't even blame it on anything, I had just lost the words. This kind of thing happens more often as we age. You might notice that your brain doesn't seem to be working as quickly as it used to, especially during fast-paced conversations. It's not that you're not paying attention, it's just that your brain has a bit more trouble processing things quickly. According to research published in the Journal of Gerontology, older adults often experience a slowdown in processing speed, which makes it harder to keep up with rapid exchanges. You know, those conversations where everyone is talking over each other, and you find yourself thinking, wait, what just happened? Suddenly, you're not just keeping up with the conversation, you're struggling to stay in sync. But what's even more awkward than forgetting the punchline or losing your train of thought is that no one really calls it out. Everyone feels the tension, but nobody wants to be the one to point it out. So you're left sitting there, feeling like the whole world is waiting for you to catch up, but no one says anything. It's a strange feeling, and it's easy to start questioning yourself. Am I losing my mind? You wonder. Why can't I just finish this thought? But honestly, it's a pretty common experience, especially as we get older. Your brain is still sharp, it just doesn't always work at the same speed as before. At the end of the day, these moments aren't the end of the world. Sure, they're awkward, but they're also completely normal. Everyone has those moments when words seem to just vanish and you're left floundering. The important thing is to laugh it off. After all, we've all been there, and the more we let ourselves accept these little quirks, the less embarrassed we feel when they happen. Research published in the Journal of Gerontology found that as we age, there's a natural slowdown in processing speed and working memory. In simple terms, our brains just don't work as fast as they used to. We're still sharp, but it takes a little more time to process information, especially in fast-paced conversations. So, when someone's telling a story and the conversation is bouncing from one topic to the next, you might find yourself lagging behind, trying to catch up. And that's when these long, uncomfortable pauses start happening. You want to join in, you want to keep up with the conversation, but your brain is still processing the last sentence while everyone else is already 3 topics ahead. So, you're just sitting there, staring at the other person, silently panicking while you try to remember what you were supposed to say next. The worst part is that nobody really wants to point it out. It feels rude, doesn't it? If someone's taking a little longer to respond, it's awkward to call attention to it, so everyone just waits. But that silence is deafening, and you can practically feel the pressure building. It's like you're the only one who's not on the same wavelength, even though you're trying your best to keep up. This creates this invisible tension where you're wondering if anyone's noticed how long it's been since you last spoke, but no one says a word. It's one of those things that happens slowly over time, so you don't really notice it happening at first, but when it does, it's hard to shake off that feeling of being left behind in a conversation. And speaking of things that no one really mentions, but everyone notices, how about your body language? As we get older, we tend to become more closed off without realizing it. You may catch yourself slouching more, crossing your arms during conversations, or just not using as much open, confident posture as you used to. This isn't because you're suddenly less confident, it's just that the physical toll of aging can impact how we hold ourselves. Over time, weakened muscles, joint pain, or even simple fatigue can make it hard to stand tall and keep a relaxed posture. And when we don't keep our body language open, it can unintentionally send signals to others that we're tired, uninterested, or just not as engaged. It's like your body's telling a story that you don't even realize you're telling. Another subtle change that sneaks up is the way you walk. You know that pep in your step you had when you were younger? Yeah, it starts to fade as you age. It's not that you've lost all energy, but your joints start to ache, and those little aches and pains can make you shuffle or drag your feet. Research from the National Institute on Aging shows that as we get older, muscle strength and coordination decrease, which impacts the way we move. The funny part? You might think you're walking just fine until someone points out that you've started walking at a slower pace or that you've developed a slight limp. You don't even realize it's happening, but it's all part of the aging process. And, let's be honest, it's not exactly the graceful stride you had in your 20s. Here's something else you might not even notice: the increasing struggle to keep up with trends and technology. It's almost like one day, you're casually browsing social media, and the next, you're asking your younger relatives how to use your smartphone or what a hashtag even is. It's not that you're not trying, it's just that the world keeps changing, and it's hard to keep up. According to Pew Research, older adults have been slower to adopt new technology, but in recent years, they've been catching up. Still, there's no denying that the younger generation seems to be born with an innate understanding of how everything works. And this creates a kind of generational gap. It's nothing to be ashamed of, but it does make you feel a little disconnected at times, especially when you can't figure out how to update your Instagram or set up your smart home devices. Now, let's talk about something that's not so funny: the forgetting of names and faces. This little slip-up happens to everyone, no matter how young or old you are, but as we get older, it seems to become more common. You know the feeling: you walk into a room and suddenly have no idea why you're there. Or worse, you bump into an old friend, and your brain goes completely blank. The name is right there, but you just can't seem to pull it out of your memory. It's a moment of sheer panic, and let's be honest, a little bit of embarrassment too. You try to cover it up with a smile or a vague comment like, "Hey, it's been so long," but deep down, you're praying they don't notice how awkward the situation is. The thing is, there's a scientific reason behind it. As we age, our short-term memory and ability to recall details naturally start to decline. It's not that we're forgetting on purpose or not paying attention, it's just that our brains aren't as quick as they used to be. One of the culprits behind this memory lapse is the hippocampus, the part of our brain responsible for forming new memories. As we get older, the hippocampus actually shrinks, and this impacts our ability to store and retrieve new information, like the names and faces of people we've recently met or haven't seen in a while. But here's the kicker: while forgetting a name here or there may seem like a harmless senior moment, it can be a little disheartening. Everyone notices it. That awkward pause when you don't immediately remember someone's name, and you see their face light up with recognition while yours stays frozen, trying to recall the details. It's like the brain is flipping through an old photo album but somehow can't find the right page. The harder you try to remember, the more elusive the name becomes, until you end up covering it up with a laugh and a "you've changed so much," or "it's been ages." And let's not forget the conversations where you're introduced to someone, and it's all smiles and pleasantries, but by the time you walk away, their name has already vanished from your memory. You might even replay the introduction in your head, thinking, "How could I forget?" But that's just the nature of getting older. The reality is that your brain is doing its best, but sometimes it just doesn't quite keep up with the rapid-fire pace of life. This little memory lapse doesn't just happen with people you've just met. It can also occur with people you've known for years. You know the type: old friends, colleagues, or distant relatives, people you've spent a lot of time with, but the next time you run into them, you're suddenly stuck trying to recall who they are or what you were supposed to say to them. You might find yourself stumbling over words or offering up an awkward hug instead of a handshake because you're not sure if they want one. It's those moments that make you realize how much your brain is working overtime to keep track of everything, and sometimes it just needs a little break. Unfortunately, that doesn't make it any less uncomfortable when you can't remember a face or a name in the moment. While you may try to laugh it off, it's hard not to feel a little self-conscious. After all, nobody likes the idea of being the person who forgets others. It's one of those things that happens gradually, so you don't notice it happening at first, but when it does, it can feel a little disorienting. You're not losing your mind, though. Your brain is still doing its best to keep things together. The problem is, it's just a little less efficient than it used to be. The reality is that these odd things we do as we age are part of the package deal. Aging isn't all sunshine and rainbows, and no one's immune to it. We all have our little quirks that creep up on us without warning, and we may not even realize we're doing them. But here's the thing: everyone goes through it, so you're not alone. While some of these changes can be a little embarrassing, they don't have to define us. We can always learn to adapt, embrace the little oddities, and laugh at ourselves along the way. The next time you catch yourself talking a little louder than you thought or forgetting someone's name, remember, you're just part of the aging club, and trust me, no one's judging. So, embrace it, laugh it off, and enjoy the ride. After all, getting older is better than the alternative.